So a very warm afternoon, evening to everyone, and welcome. Mellon Lazaro, I'm the Director General of ΕΛΙΑΜΕΠ, the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy. And it's really a great honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to our discussion on EU competitiveness this evening. Before I very briefly introduce you to the subject, which I won't really do because we have our experts here today and our speakers to talk about it, I want to extend some special thanks for today's meeting, which for us at ΕΛΙΑΜΕΠ is extremely important. And it's important because competitiveness really lies at the cusp of everything we do research on. It spans across the agenda of the EU's priorities. It is a cross-cutting theme across the priorities of every single presidency of the Council of the European Union between now and the end of 2027, when Greece will assume its Council presidency, and is the big bet for European Union's values, norms, but also its economy, its people. I am delighted today that we are co-organizing this event with the Foundation for Economic and Industrial Research, ΙΟΒΕ, and with the IE Competitiveness Hub in Brussels and in Spain. And I am mostly grateful to our speakers today, His Excellency Enrico Letta, the former Prime Minister of Italy and Dean of the School of Politics, Economics and Global Affairs at IE University, and of course Kyriakos Pierrakakis, President of the Eurogroup and Minister of National Economy and Finance, but also, as he just reminded me, a former fellow think tanker. I need no introduction. No one needs an introduction to our speakers today. They are known for their work, for thinking, for their reports. But today we will really have a 45-minute flash exchange between them and our moderator, Viktώρια Δενδρινού, head of the bureau chief of Bloomberg in Athens, on where EU competitiveness is going. Because, of course, competitiveness is not a static notion. It's a dynamic notion. It's a notion that entails progress. And it's a notion which preoccupies the brains and minds of officials and experts across the European Union and beyond. I'm grateful to our partners for organizing. I'm grateful to the Parliament for giving us this wonderful building to hold our event in today, and to the President of the Parliament, Mr. Nikitas Kaklamanis. I'm very thankful to Manos Matsaganis, who heads our European Economy Program at ΕΛΙΑΜΕΠ. We are mostly known for being a think tank that carries out research on geopolitics, foreign policy, climate change, and EU policies. But in many ways, an economy that thrives, an economy that prospers, an economy that allows for equity, equality, and sustainability lies behind the success of all these policies. So our growing program on the European and Greek economy is really a pillar of what we aim to do at ΕΛΙΑΜΕΠ. Now, everyone says today that Europe is at crossroads, and many of you will know we've been saying this for many years for different reasons. What changes each time is the way you, and sometimes it's about buzzwords like strategic autonomy and competitiveness, and sometimes it's about very deep existential issues about the direction of the European Union. But today, I think we can safely say that competitiveness is an existential issue. It underpins the way that most European Union policies will be carried out, the way in which they will manage to glue together citizens across the European Union, the way they will work themselves into interinstitutional cooperation that makes legislation more flexible, more effective, the way it will stimulate investment that allows the EU to compete globally in technology, in energy, in defense, in clean tech, in artificial intelligence, in space-based technology. And it will allow the members of the European Union, such as Greece and Italy, to manage to carry out their own foreign policies, to strengthen their own leverage and diplomatic weight across the world through that European Union competitiveness. So with that, I will leave you. I will give the floor over to Nikos Vetas, who's been a great partner in organizing this. Thank you so much. And then give the floor to our speakers and our moderators. So I hope you will enjoy this evening, and I look forward to the discussion.
Naturally, I'm going to be very short. Elena thanked everyone that should be thanked. So on behalf of ΙΟΒΕ, we thank Elena and ΕΛΙΑΜΕΠ, as well as the IE Competitiveness Hub for this event. On the board, there is Europe and there is competitiveness. Competitiveness, you shouldn't let an economy start talking about it because they will never stop. There is a matter of topics that I believe our esteemed speakers are going to touch upon. President Letta and Minister Pierakakis, also President of the Eurogroup. We more or less suspect matters that have to do with policy, but also with how it interferes and intersects with politics, because without political and social support, pretty much nothing can happen. I was thinking as I was coming here, Europe is not one thing. Europe is a collective something. Whatever we discuss about, there may be winners and losers. So policies have to make sure that they get enough support behind them so that the ones are compensated for the other. Europe also is not just its future, it is its past. We have been, over the last decades, benefited from the fear that we will not go back to a war, that we will have to integrate Eastern Europe. But now the challenges are around us and they are clear. So how this can propel us ahead. And then, as I'm sure Viktώρια Δενδρινού, who is going to moderate the discussion, and we were very grateful to her for this, I'm sure she's going to intersect the question about technology and how technology affects not only competitiveness, but also people's lives. I think I have exhausted my time. Viktώρια, yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to ΕΛΙΑΜΕΠ and to ΙΟΒΕ for organizing this event, for bringing these two speakers with us today. They need no introduction. They've been introduced already, Mr. Letta and Mr. Pierakakis. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm the bureau chief for Bloomberg News here in Athens, but I've also spent the better part of a decade in Brussels covering the European Union and the European Union economy. So the topics we're going to discuss are dear to my heart. Very curious to hear your insights and, you know, talking about where Europe is and where the European economy is, European competitiveness is. In this current global geopolitical context, I can't think of a better time to discuss these issues. But, you know, we're just over a year into the second Trump presidency. There's a war in the Middle East. Geopolitical competition seems to be the name of the game. And while everyone seems to agree that Europe needs to be more sovereign, more independent, has more strategic autonomy, when the questions are raised about how it should proceed, there's sometimes a lot of awkwardness. There's a lot of difficulty in getting the things done. So Mr. Letta, he's written a report on what should happen, and we should talk to him about it today. But broadly speaking, the single market is still very fragmented. European savings are still flying to the US despite everything that's happening. So this backdrop makes this conversation even more interesting, I think. But the other kind of event that's relevant to this, and part of the reason why this event's happening today is that it's the 40th anniversary of the Single European Act, which, for those who are not super familiar with EU treaties, basically establishes greater push to complete the single market. So maybe, Mr. Letta, starting with you, looking at where the single market is today, do you think the signatories of the Single European Act would be excited, disappointed, surprised about where the completion of the single market stands?
First of all, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be here with such an audience of people passionate and experts on these topics representing the world. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to be listened by eminent ambassadors of the most important countries. But first of all, let me say that I'm very happy to be here with Kyriakos because I feel to be aside with someone who is making European history. I'm someone who is trying to say words. He is doing things, and that it makes the difference. And I think that, and for me, it was fantastic to be together last week in Brussels, where we inaugurated the Center of Applied Research of my university, this IE Brussels Competitiveness Hub. This event here, co-organized, is our first event after the inauguration. So great for me to be here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. The single market I think for me, for my generation, is the reason why we are proudly pro-European and passionate for Europe. I became a passionate pro-European because of Europe of '92. I became passionate pro-European because of eliminating borders. That was the fantastic mission, flagship, and dream of Europe of '92. That was the consequence of the single act and the treaty. The elimination of borders. For people like me, I visited Russia, or sorry, Soviet Union before the collapse of the Berlin Wall. I was in East Berlin before the end. The idea to being free, to have freedom, to have free movement, to move from one country to another in Europe without showing passports, without changing currency, money. I remember with a group of friends, we had a trip around Europe once, and we took all together, of course I'm talking about lira, the Italian currency, we took all together 1 million liras. It seems big money. It was not big money at that time. But we brought 1 million liras, and we changed every country we moved. We changed this currency, this money, this amount of money. At the end of the trip, without spending anything, we had 600,000 liras. That was the world before the euro, before the unification of Europe. That was the world with borders. I am the generation of that discovered Ryanair. And Ryanair, for us, it was, I usually say to my kids, my boys, they are in their 20s, they are 3. And for them, Ryanair is like taking the bus. And I was studying in my university in Pisa, and I'm preparing my essay on the European law. And for me, it was impossible to go to Brussels. Technically impossible to go to Brussels. There was only 2 companies, Alitalia and Sabena. They had in a monopoly, in a cross monopoly. The price was totally impossible. I think it's not by chance they both failed, Alitalia and Sabena, because they weren't able to adapt to the new world. And today Ryanair is still alive. And I strongly think that the big success of Europe was because of these flagships. Freedom, opportunities for people, for young people. This is why I think today the only way to be successful is to exit from the technicalities. And I like very much Kyriakos, because Kyriakos is a president of the Eurogroup and a minister that is able to speak the very complicated topics in a very simple way. Because if we think that we discuss about savings and investments union in a technical way, I think we will fail as Europe failed on many other topics. Kyriakos, last week I was, after our meeting in Brussels, I was in Frankfurt. I met the people of ECB, and in this meeting they were provoking me on SIU in a very technical way. I told them, hey, please, ask AI what is SIU, the acronym. And if you ask AI what does it mean, SIU, 99% of the answers, I was in a meeting with Albuquerque, Portuguese commissioner that you know very well. 99% of the answers are related to another Portuguese. That is not Albuquerque. That is Cristiano Ronaldo. Because CU is the way in which Cristiano Ronaldo celebrates his goals, usually. And globally, SIU is known as Cristiano Ronaldo, not as your job and Albuquerque's job. So my provocation is here is to say that we have to be good enough in 1 year time to make possible that the next 1 year answers to the AI devices will have as answer SAU is good for the people, will give better returns to the people, will help investment of the European Union, as we had 40 years ago. So my answer is that the single market was the most important achievement of the European Union because it was the sense of freedom, freedom for the people, and freedom for the people and meeting the people. It was the way to relaunch what we didn't do before, and it was great. So I think we will be successful only if we are able to give this similar sense of improvement of personal life of people and great European values.
No, Mr. Lagakis, maybe you can follow up on this a bit. I mean, you've been at the helm of the Eurogroup for 5 months, I think now. You've been attending these meetings for a while. Based on how you're reading the room, do you think Europe has what it takes to take on the US at this juncture? I mean, we've heard about how great the past has been, but one question is, can it go on with the future in this current environment?
I wouldn't necessarily frame it as taking on the US. What I would try to do, what I would try, in a sense, to facilitate both me and my colleagues would be capacity building what we need to capacity build. First of all, let me say, it's a great privilege to share the stage with Enrico Letta. We were together in Brussels, as he said last week and many times before. And I really loved the way you framed it, because I think to a very large extent, vocabulary dominates the room. What Enrico has done with his report and what Mario Draghi has done with his report is, in a sense, trying to shape the vocabulary of what we as 27 ministers of finance in ECOFIN or 21 of the Eurogroup and what our leaders should be able to deliver quite soon. And sharing the vocabulary is critical because we need to mean the same things when we articulate them. We need to have a common north in the compass. And this might sound self-evident, but it's not really self-evident. So this is exactly why last week, given your Italian nationality, I sort of described both you and Mario Draghi as the two popes of European integration. But having you in Athens right now preaching the gospel, quote unquote, I think you're probably the St. Paul of European integration. But broadly speaking, stars are aligned. We have delayed a lot in the delivery of changes. Describing the savings and the investment union, describing the SIU to citizens, you write many articles yourself about it. It's extremely difficult to pass the message. In effect, rebranding the capital markets union and the banking union, which we didn't deliver in time. I visited The Hague a bit more than a month ago, and Elko Heinen, my Dutch colleague, told me that the capital markets union was part of the priorities of the Dutch presidency of the European Union in 2016. So it's a belated discussion, but it's a self-evident discussion because effectively we need to capacity build all the areas we haven't. So certain things are obvious, and here I would say you have certain similarities with the Greek case when we assumed office in 2019. Because there is something in politics which I would describe as the dividend of the obvious. The obvious thing that you haven't done and it's sitting there, and should you do it, as it has accumulated over years, can provide a growth dividend on top of your potentially optimal or non-optimal reaction to the things that you haven't really precipitated, which you don't expect, the unexpected crises that are emerging. So any policymaker in the world right now needs to have this duality, both domestically in a member state like us or at the European level. And Europe has a potential dividend of delivering upon the obvious, the elimination of those hidden barriers. The IMF calculated, and we repeat that study a lot, that those barriers actually could be calculated like tariffs. In services, 110%, in manufacturing, 44%. And even if you believe that the technical manner through which this was calculated is not necessarily accurate, it sort of signals, it sort of magnifies the glass of what we need to deliver. So the SIU has many elements. What are those elements? Well, you need stock market integration. Chancellor Merz said that ideally Europe should have one stock market. You need banking consolidation. We need larger banks. We need more cross-border consolidation. Cross-border consolidation in Europe has been dropping since 2008, actually, in the graph that we saw in the previous Eurogroup. If you look at the technological investments of banks, and you compare the technological investments of European banks to American and Chinese banks, they are far below. And this is an area which is also being disrupted by technology. Nikos Veta said it before. So getting a common understanding of all of those things, and yes, communicating them properly, is a sine qua non in order to be able to advance. Stars are aligning because you have many exogenous events, from Russia's invasion to Ukraine to a loss of geopolitical innocence overall with regards to who should be paying for security premium. If you add all of those things up, there is currently the political will to deliver upon the projects. What we as ministers should try to deliver is the actual, let's say, policy. Because we all theoretically agree with the Savings and Investment Union, but we have an asterisk which typically reflects a national interest. So do you focus on the opportunity cost of non-delivery, or do you focus on the asterisk? This is what will sort of define how quickly we will be able to move ahead. It's not going to be a yes or no thing. It's not going to be a black and white thing. It's going to be a question of how much distance we're going to cover on the field. And my feeling is that in many of those areas, be that the supplementary pensions package that's currently being discussed, be that the market supervision package, you will see progress. It will be a question of magnitude and a question of speed.
I can confirm what your Dutch colleague said. I was actually in Brussels when the Capital Markets Union proposal was made, and it was made by the then British Commissioner, which gives you a sense of how long ago this was. So I think it was the fall of 2015. But you mentioned a few low-hanging fruit. Mr. Letta, in your opinion, what's if you had to pick one integration reform that's the most urgent for the EU to do over the next 2 to 3 years, what would you pick?
I have no doubt that the main problem is scale. And the main problem is scale because we are far behind the rest of the world because of the fragmentation of our financial markets. I can tell you that in the preparation of my report, I was really impressed or scared maybe because I visited all the member states. I had many meetings everywhere in Europe, many meetings in Athens, and I'm very grateful to the Greek authorities for that. And I remember a fantastic meeting in the parliament. And for me, let me say that discussing within the Greek parliament is something very strong in terms of emotion on these topics. But the key point is the fact that discussing about these topics and trying to launch on the Savings and Investments Union the sense of scale is not easy for the very simple problem that we are having. The sense of this distance today is totally different from the approach that we are having. Because in Europe, we like small things. We are small countries. We are full of small cities. We are the kingdom of SMEs. And I'm very happy. My country is the kingdom of SMEs, and I lived always in small cities, and I like very much the small dimension, which is the main problem, is the fact that the world has totally changed in terms of scale, and we as Europeans, we didn't integrate on the financial markets. I was impressed by the fact that meeting all the people I met around Europe, I had so many people, even very, I would say, experts on many topics, telling me, but we have the euro, so we are integrated. We are the euro, so we are one economy. Why are you telling us we are not integrated enough? We have the euro. The euro is the symbol, the the ultimate symbol of the integration. And in reality, history matters. We integrated the euro, and we decided politically 30 years ago to postpone the rest because digesting the euro was a very complicated political issue for some countries, 3 countries. Germany, because they were leaving the Deutschmark. France, they were leaving le franc. For a country with the name France, leaving a currency with the name franc is not immediate, it's not simple. And for Italy, that is for me the, I would say, incomprehensible point, because leaving the lira was not a very complicated issue, but it was complicated politically. We had such a big opposition to change the currency. In France, they had the new currency with a referendum, and the referendum was 51-49, 51-49. So it was complicated. So we decided to postpone the rest, and we said, now we take a rest after the euro. The main problem is that after the euro, we had the financial crisis, and it was not the right moment. Then we had Brexit, and Brexit killed the Capital Markets Union, because it was a very good idea with London as capital, but London decided to leave. Then we had the migration crisis, we had COVID, and we postponed. And in the same time, the world has changed in two ways. A country that was united became stronger in terms of financial markets. And the financial markets, the US financial market, became the big engine of all the achievements and the improvement of the US on innovation, because they were able to put a magnitude of investments that we weren't able to do. And on the other side, some countries became giants. China, tomorrow India. I always use the comparison with my own country, Italy, when we created the euro and when we had the lira and so on and so forth. Italy was 60 million people. China and India together were 3 billion people. And economically, Italy was as big as China and India together. That is today simply crazy to think something similar. Today, they are 20 times Italy. But our generations lived in a time in which we had the strongest, the biggest revolution in economic history, the rise of China. And tomorrow, the rise of India, 2 billion people speaking English. That makes the difference. So we have only one possibility, that is to integrate. If we continue non-integrating, we will continue with this contradiction that is the usual contradiction of the European Union, that is a union of member states in which we have 27 member states divided in two groups of countries, the small countries and the countries they don't know they are small. We are all small countries in this world. Italy is big as one province of China. And the same for the others. So my answer to your question is that scale is a fundamental point. If we are not able to scale, it will be impossible to be competitive today. For the very simple reason that if you give a look to the way in which as consumers we are starting, and I come back to my experience, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been impossible for an Italian consumer to buy a Chinese car. I have a lot of friends telling me, why not? Technological is good, is cheaper. My wallet is allowing me to buy this car, and I buy the Chinese car. And this has consequences. So the main point is that we have to know that scaling is not against the small dimension. I want to underline this point. This is crucial. Scaling is in favor of small dimension. You can think it's counterintuitive. No, because all the world of SMEs is successful if there's a champion winning and being competitive. They work around a champion that is competitive. But if the champion is a national champion that is declining because the national dimension is not enough, the SMEs around this champion will lose velocity. And this is the key issue. Today we are declining because of the lack of scale. And this lack of scale is absolutely fundamental. We are dependent on US technology. We are dependent on US finance. We were dependent on Russian energy. We were dependent and we are dependent on Chinese manufacturing. Every moment of our life, we give a look to data from satellites. All these satellites are American satellites. And we're very happy to have these satellites, these American satellites. That's a big problem. And the big problem is that some months ago, someone wrote a tweet saying to the Ukrainians and to the Europeans, if you please behave. If you don't behave, I disconnect you. And if I disconnect you, you collapse in 1 minute. And this is why I say all these discourses are related to independence, autonomy, not against someone. Being independent means, in the world of today, the capacity on the scale side to put together the small and the big. If we are able to do so, we can be successful. And we have to start from finance. Today, if you take all the financial brands, the American financial brands and the European financial brands, basket, if you put a list by dimension of all these financial brands, the first European financial brands is the 36th. The first 35 are all American brands. That means that we are too small because we are fragmented. I insist on this point both on financial side but also on other aspects, because in my view this is absolutely crucial.
I'm going to get to national champions in a minute because I think we both have strong feelings on that. But I mean, you said it took 30 years basically to digest the euro. It doesn't feel like Europe has another 30 years to think about its next steps. Do you get the sense that at this moment, this geopolitical landscape where Europe is stress tested all the time, do you feel like EU leaders have the appropriate sense of urgency right now about what they need to do?
My answer is yes. I attended a European Council meeting 3 months ago in this retreat that the Council organized with the two writers of the reports. I was there with Draghi, and I can tell you that I had the feeling in this meeting that the goodwill is there, the determination is there. I think there's another big push, and I say that not because Kyriakos is here, but the message that the Eurogroup gave to the world and to Europe to have the Greek finance minister as president is a big, big, big message to the world. I like it as a strong message in terms of we are proud of what we are determined, and we can be successful. And the rest of the topics are related to what happened 2 weeks ago. Three weeks ago, the European Council, the European Parliament, the European Commission jointly approved a roadmap of 42 measures with deliverables, deadlines on savings and investments union, on the 28 regime, on energy, on connectivity, on the fifth freedom, the Industrial Accelerator Act. These are very concrete topics. That's not theory. It's very concrete on how to help Europe to be more integrated, more competitive, and more innovative. That is our main problem. And everything started 3 months ago. So if you ask me 3 months ago, maybe I was less optimistic. Today, I see the path. I spoke with the Irish presidency, and the Irish presidency for the next semester is very determined to continue and to accelerate in that direction. So there's the sense of the momentum. And the sense of the momentum is what we are feeling in Brussels, the sense of the momentum. Of course, we can waste this momentum. We can waste this momentum. And I maybe anticipate your next question. There's no plan B. If we miss this opportunity, I think it will be impossible to recuperate But we have a great opportunity. It's a mix between what is happening around us, the big pressures, Kyriakos said, that are telling us we have to accelerate, and the fact that there's today an alignment of stars at the European level to get possible these results. Now we have to move.
So no pressure, Minister Pyrakakis, to not miss the opportunity. I wanted to go talk a bit about national champions and European champions. Mr. Pyrakakis, do you think Europe can realistically compete globally if it doesn't have more concentration, if it doesn't have these kinds of companies that we mentioned, the more European champions, national champions that are big enough?
I think that the question following up what Enrico said is actually rhetorical. You cannot achieve scale if we keep on having 27 versions of national champions. And this discussion interacts a lot with the technological discussion and the cross-border discussion. More consolidation, for instance, in banks is absolutely necessary. By the way, on that front, I'm quite proud that Greece had a very positive mentality, both with regards to UniCredit obtaining a larger share of Alpha Bank, one of our systemic banks, and vis-a-vis Euronext obtaining the Athens Stock Exchange. This is more or less what needs to happen in any, I would say, market, in any industry in Europe. You need to achieve larger scale, and you need European champions to compete. But the real ball game is technology. And on technology, frankly, we are on plan B mode right now because we were extremely delayed. Europe needs, and this is why vocabulary plays a huge role, a common strategy or a common doctrine on what we describe as technological sovereignty. I wouldn't frame it actually as autonomy, because realistically it cannot happen. We cannot develop a European version of anything, of all the technologies, of all the menu. It's purely impossible because there are certain issues where we sit very far away from the technological frontier, and other issues where we do have the European champions, and they're ready to grow, and they're ready to have even larger ecosystems around them, and we're simply not deploying them, we're simply not delivering them. One example on this. The policies of the first Trump administration, we have discussed it a lot on telecom, in effect touched on 5G infrastructure, and in effect targeted the Chinese company. Who were the competitors of the Chinese company? Was it an American company? It was actually two European companies, Ericsson and Nokia. The idea there would have been more or less the following. What we did here domestically was to have a pro-market spectrum, quick deployment of 5G, and then we instrumentalized, we took 25% of the auction proceeds, and we tried to create a fund to fund 5G applications, because the monetization of the technology, the innovation would happen out of this rather than out of the infrastructure. But Greece does not have the scale to do this at the requisite level. I mean, imagine the counterfactual. The counterfactual is that you have one telecom regulator in Europe, you deploy one spectrum auction in Europe, and then you take a portion of the proceeds, and EIB is endowed with those proceeds, and you create a mega fund to deliver upon the applications of 5G. This was a discussion to be had in 2020, not in 2026. So what's the dilemma right now, for instance, in technology? I would actually say that the goal isn't to be autonomous, with certain exceptions, which I will underline. The goal is not to be asymmetrically interdependent, because there are certain technologies where the Americans have the lead, there are certain technologies where the Chinese have the lead, there are certain technologies where we might have the lead. Those are the European champions. So what do? You basically fund the winners. You basically try to grow the European champions who can compete globally through the ecosystems that can be deployed around them. Are there asterisks to this policy option? I would say there's one. The areas where you need autonomy for national security reasons, or where you think an edge is attainable. Airbus was such a case, for instance. Galileo was such a case, for instance. So that's option B. But you cannot do this at scale. You cannot build a European version of the cloud very quickly. You cannot build a European version of all the menu very quickly. So what do you do with the rest? You become a smart regulator, not an over-regulator, but a nitty-gritty regulator who understands the specific technology that you're trying to regulate. So basically you have three options. But the core idea is that you need to have a mentality of European champions, a mentality of scale, which touches upon many levels. Part of it is allowing for companies which are national champions to grow at European champion status. This is the banking consolidation story, for instance. Another story is what Enrico just described. We participated at a conference recently, and there was a panel of very successful European startups which became scale-ups. Spotify was one of them, I remember vividly. So there was a core criticism on behalf of them that we can start up in Europe. The EIB, for instance, has played a phenomenal role in deploying the venture capital industry in many countries like this one. So you can start a company, you can start growing it, and then at some point it cannot scale up because the fragmentation of the European market is significant still. That's one thing. And the second thing is that after a certain point, most of them become Delaware corporations, and most of them quasi-necessitate American funding at the mezzanine level and above. It shouldn't be avoided per se, but it should be an option, not a necessity. So the idea here is to create the best level playing field by the elimination of those barriers that still exist. This is the SIU, this is the Savings and Investment Union. Startups need to be able to become scale-ups in Europe, and then I think all of policymakers in Europe, in every government, need to have a mentality switch. And the mentality switch is that we need to go European with regards to our champions, and we need to understand this fast, because after some point, we will miss another very significant opportunity without a plan B being actually in front of us.
Are you at all concerned that this by design is going to benefit companies from the larger member states, or do you think smaller member states have something to win?
I fully adhere to what Enrico Letta said. This is actually to the benefit of the smaller member states, because it provides an opportunity. I mean, think of it at the helicopter view. Europe has a productivity problem. Europe has a productivity challenge. If you compare American productivity and European productivity, we are at a lower level. Why are we at a lower level? Part of it is market structure. Places like Italy, places like Greece have a much lower average size of companies, which need to start growing, merging, and achieving better and bigger scale. But the problem is fundamentally European. If you add demographics in the mix, if you add innovation in the mix, then the problem becomes much more significant. So what do we need to do? A, you do the obvious things. You eliminate the barriers, you start integrating more, you achieve a better mentality and attain a better mentality of achieving that scale. You understand why this is beneficial. Why is it beneficial to have the Athens Stock Exchange as the Euronext Stock Exchange rather than the Athens Stock Exchange per se? That's the dilemma that every member state should answer in every market. But I believe fundamentally that this is not only pro-European, it's to the interest and to the benefit of every single country.
One issue that's sometimes come up, and maybe Mr. Letta, you can answer this because you have a less institutional role in this context, is the EU's competition framework. Do you feel EU competition rules right now are fit for purpose for what you're describing, to allow these companies to flourish, to allow this kind of integration, or do they need a rethink?
It's a discussion that is taking place. There is the new guidance, the new mergers paper that the Commission has just presented. I think is a topic where things are changing, and I think today it would be different for the Commission to decide, for instance, on Alstom Siemens. If it was something similar, it was a different moment. Competition laws has to be applied to the idea that Europe in the world, we are not, I would say, alone in the world. And this idea to keep everything in this national environment is a big mistake. I give you one example, personal life. I am working today between France and Spain, and I live in Italy. I rent an apartment in one of the two countries. I don't want to say which one because it's the same, and it would be the same in Italy. I rent this very small apartment. I start a negotiation, very effective and everything perfect, with the call center to change the electricity company in the apartment. At the end of this very, very fast call, the call center asks me, I have just to complete the dossier. Please give me your bank account number and your telephone number. I gave him my bank account number and my telephone number. Silence on the other side. And I said, everything okay? And he said, sorry, what is this IT at the beginning of your bank account number? And what is this plus 39 in your number? I don't recognize it. I was I confess that my first reaction, my first temptation was to say, hey, please, I send you my report on the single market. Because it shows that I have a constitutional right to have energy in Spain, even if I have a bank account in Italy, is the value of the single market. I didn't, because it was not the worker's responsibility, but he had rules, like in Italy is the same, in which we protect our national champions. Which was the consequence? The consequence is that I have 3 telephone numbers, 1 Italian, 1 French, and 1 Spanish. Because roaming exists, yes, but if you want to live in one country being totally free, you need to have the telephone of this country. And the same for the banks. I have 3 banks, 1 in Italy, 1 in France, 1 in Spain. Which is the consequence of that? Of course, I don't care in terms of, we say, fatigue for the consumer. It's not my problem. It's the fact that I was obliged to open other bank accounts and not to continue working with my bank. And my bank was kept. And this is the typical way in which we live in Europe. We fragment, we protect our national environment, and we are all happy. I want to be provocative because you said you don't have any responsibility. I can be provocative. We are, which is the most complicated issue here, and the most complicated responsibility on the shoulders of leaders like Kyriakos. The present situation, there's a lot of people happy with the present situation. There are, I'm sorry to say that, there's a lot of CEOs happy. Because you have your country asking you, relax, take a rest, and do not change anything. Do not merge, do not take risks. So your bonuses are okay if you stay like you are, not moving everything. Politicians are very happy because you have national champions. What does it mean? You have CEOs with the telephone number with your indicator. That means that you call them, they answer. They speak your own language. They come from your same environment, and you know what I mean. I can continue. The present situation is making a lot of people happy. And the big problem is that this present situation is making happy also the American, the Chinese, and the others, because it's giving a lot of gifts to them. And take what is happening on the defense industry. Because of the fragmentation of our defense industry, large part of what we spent to help the Ukrainians was to buy military furniture not European and to create jobs out of Europe. I don't want to say where. And I think it's a problem because this money are money of European taxpayers. And for money of European taxpayers, we have to create jobs in defense and security here, not out of Europe. And this is because of fragmentation. So I insist on these points because it is not evident. What we are discussing here seems evident, but inertia is going in another direction. This is why it's absolutely necessary to have this counterfactual evidence. The one on jobs, on defense is so evident, but there are so many other evidences that are showing, take the savings, 300 billion euros each year flying from Europe to the US. Money of European savers, 300 billion euros each year, being transformed by European savers in American companies' shares, the same companies that are coming back to Europe buying European companies with our own money. That is the ultimate suicide of our fragmentation.
Well, hopefully in a couple of years, Mr. Kyriakakis will have advanced financial integration so much we can close down at least one of those accounts. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I wanted to change gears a bit. You talked about technology, but we haven't spoken about AI, which seems to be top of mind for everyone. I know you're interested in it. The Eurogroup discussed it earlier this month, I believe. First of all, I mean, do you think Europe has lost the race of this? And given what you see in the room in the Eurogroup, do you feel your colleagues and Europe in general is prepared for the transformation that's happening?
To be fully frank, the debate is whether any of us are fully prepared about the transformation that is happening, because technological change is always exponential. The issue is that the scale and the speed of this change right now is manifesting itself in the weeks and in the months rather than in the years or in the decades. And you spoke about your generation and the issues of the previous generation as viewed. In my generation, one of the top technological transformations, or let's say technology-driven transformations in business, was the transition from the video club at Blockbuster to Netflix. And this transformation took 15 years, 10 years plus. I remember being a student in the US and receiving Netflix DVDs at home. And then after some point, all the video clubs and all the various traditional blockbusters closed down. But it took years. The difference with AI right now is that certain transformations vis-a-vis their impact in jobs, vis-a-vis their impact in education and health, you name it, is going to happen extremely fast. The problem is that conceptually, biologically, we understand the world linearly. We typically believe that the extrapolation of the previous 2 weeks is going to come in the next 2 weeks. And this is not going to be the case. So right now, we're trying to assess the impact. And the problem with AI is that it has a dual nature, as in any technology, from the Schumpeterian description of creative destruction. The problem is that it has the elements of both a moon race and a nuclear arms race. The moon race element is vivid, it's obvious. Productivity gains, economic gains, positive elements in education, in any policy area. The nuclear arms race is the adverse effects. The mythos LLM of Anthropic is phenomenally powerful. As we understand it, it has the potential to practically unlock the vulnerabilities of every technological system. And this is the here and the now. So if we try to think a little bit further, in a couple of months, you might have 3 companies or 4 companies that we know of that have this capability. So the question for us partly is, what's our technological strategy? What's our technology policy? How do we invest? Where do we invest, etc.? The other part of the discussion is, how do you shape global governance mechanisms? Because what Enrico previously described about Italy, Germany, and the bigger countries of the European Union, in terms of technology, the US and China are not big enough to regulate AI on a singular basis. You need a global orchestration of certain things, and you need it, frankly, at the point where multilateralism is facing the greatest challenges that it has faced in recent times. So this is a very difficult equation. We're trying, first of all, to see the impact that those LLMs have in the banking system and the potential vulnerabilities that they might unlock. We're trying to see how banks can make more cybersecurity investments at the level of the Eurogroup. I would say that European policymakers are trying to see how critical infrastructure should be protected at a time where those types of algorithms and LLMs are becoming more and more powerful every week. But overall, this is the short-run analysis. The medium-run analysis underlines the core element of your question. Where should we invest in AI? I would say that this is not one big thing. It has many elements. There are companies like Mistral in France, for instance, that have done a phenomenal job on AI. But frankly, this touches upon the European champions question as well. I would look at where, A, we have an edge, or B, we can get an edge with a very high probability if we invest quickly enough. Are there elements in AI where we can achieve that? Yes. But overall, we should be a little bit agnostic here. We shouldn't try. We have a fixed amount of investment that we can make, and a fixed, actually, amount of time that we have in our hands. Not only funding, it's funding times time. So here the question is, where do you decide to make your choice? And I think people in the market can make that choice together with, and they can drive those choices quite quickly. On certain things, the edge has been lost. On others, it can be attained. Well, Mistral is one example. Again, it's driven by the companies. 5G infrastructure, what ASML has done in chips, or other champions and other players like SAP in Germany. It doesn't necessarily need to touch upon AI per se. AI is part of the technological equation, but on AI, I would be driven by the winners.
Mr. Letta, you published a report a couple of years ago. Obviously, the AI landscape has changed quite dramatically. Has it changed your calculus or how you see what needs to happen?
In the report, there's a chapter that for me is the chapter maybe I like the most. Is the chapter on the fifth freedom at the European level. That is for me fundamental to change the approach to the future of Europe. When we created the euro, the single market, we created the single market of the four freedoms: freedom of movement of goods, services, capitals, and people. The quadripartition in four is very much old century driven. We touch the four: people, goods, capital, services. What is necessary today is launch the fifth freedom, so the intangible. And the intangible knowledge, skills, research is absolutely fundamental. This is where we are lagging behind. So the idea to have this fifth freedom as the big flagship, and I'm very grateful to the European Commission because President von der Leyen decided to give the Commissioner Sarieva the responsibility for the fifth freedom. She named fifth freedom. And I am very grateful to the Irish presidency because they want to move in that direction. In my view, it is fundamental. And as Kyriakos said, there's an acceleration of change that is absolutely incredible. What is clear is that this innovation changes the spreading of power. And today, power is linked to that. We were together in a meeting where we discussed about can Europe scale in the US? Can Europe scale with a question mark? And I was chairing this seminar and I asked the three panelists to say, answer this question with one very short answer, yes or no, and then we deep dive. And one of the panelists, the first one, said, I don't know what is the right answer, so I will ask AI. And he asked AI, can Europe scale? Question mark. And the answer, he read the answer of AI, and the answer was no. And the answer was no because there are two good reports that are giving our what to say, but the political architecture of Europe is not allowing Europe to do what I read. So the answer is no. And I asked him, please tell us which AI you asked. And he said it is an American-based AI. And in the audience, there was an influential European leader. He said, sorry, I asked Mistral. And Mistral's answer is, yes, Europe can scale because of ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. So it's a question of power because we are all using the American AI, not the European one. So we are influenced by the American AI. And I was in Shanghai last week. I was at Fudan University and I told our Chinese friends this story. And of course, a Fudan professor said, I asked DeepSeek. And the answer of DeepSeek is, can Europe scale? Question mark. Yes, Europe can scale. Ta, 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 ta. So it is clear that it is power. It is a question of influence. And if we are out of that because of lack of money, because of lack of investments, I think it makes the difference for the future.
Not a huge role in American AI, but my next question was about kind of the political will to do all this. I mean, the EU is very good at thinking about its problems. They commission a report, they guide report, always very good at identifying what the issue is, but where they struggle is with the politics and how to move ahead. Well, looking at Europe now, what do you think is more politically difficult, to pursue further integration or to accept this gradual decline for a lot of member states?
For me, the main point is the focus of the leaders on these topics, because today they are focused on Hormuz. They are focused on Hormuz. They are focused on the rise of cost of energy. They are focused on what people are asking them as answer on the short term. I can imagine what does it mean being minister today or prime minister today. You have the raise of the cost of energy because of totally exogenous hormones. 3 months ago, who was discussing about hormones? And today we have hormones. And it is clear that the solution for the inflation because of hormones, today the inflation in the US is 3.8. This is the figure of today. The answers can be today only answers, I would say, one-shot answers. You put subsidies, you ask relaxation of Stability Pact. Main problems that we discussed until now are not topics that are related to one-shot measures. They are structural. This is what we didn't do in 30 years, and we have to do. But if we are focused on needs on the short term, and we need, because inflation at 4, 5, 6% is a nightmare for the people, citizens, for companies, so we have to address it. But if we focus on that, we will forget the rest, as we did for 30 years. Because for 30 years, we had the financial crisis, we had Brexit, we had migration crisis, we had COVID, we had Russian aggression to Ukraine. So we postponed because we had always short-term crisis. And the main problem of Europe is this mismatch between short-term crisis and structural decisions to take. The short-term crises are reactions. The structural reforms are actions. The best of Europe happened when we were able to have actions. The single market, the euro, all these were actions. And reactions today is needed, is necessary, but is a little bit complicated. It is true that plans are always complicated to do. I always remember my favorite philosopher, Mike Tyson, with this phrase on plans. Everyone has a plan till he gets punched in the mouth. But in that case, Europe needs to have these actions, to move and to try to transform, because the world around us is transforming.
You know, like this debate always happens, and then you talk about things like economic integration and a safe asset, for example, and you always have a German veto. So how do you get over the German veto? You've been in the European Council. What advice would you give Mr. Kyriakakis, for example?
Because, for instance, I met the German president of the Bundesbank, and I discussed with him, and he was absolutely not in the line of vetoes. He was in the line to say, to find final common solutions. Christine Lagarde was able to put together the 27 people of the 21 plus the 6 of the executive board of the ECB on lines that are overcoming all the national red lines on the European safe asset, on the supervisory authority, on everything. So there's a goodwill to go in that direction. What is necessary, in my view, is Jacques Delors put on the table many times his resignation in front of the leaders, telling the leaders, if you stop me on that, you'll continue with someone else.
Is that your advice?
No, it's not my advice. It's just a reference to history of the European Union. But what I would like to say is that what is necessary today is to be very clear, determined, and to go in that direction. What for me is a problem today is seeing the big European countries, or the countries that they don't know they are small in Europe, not as united among them as Kohl, Mitterrand, Andreotti, Felipe González were 35 years ago. Because Jacques Delors told me, I'm president of the Jacques Delors Institute. I was so lucky to live the 5 final years of Jacques Delors' life, asking him what was the secrets when he told me how he was able, sorry, is there the British ambassador here? No. How he was able to overcome Margaret Thatcher obstacles. I say it in a polite way. In the creation of Erasmus, it is a great story, for instance. But the key point is that it is absolutely necessary, and it was necessary to see that the Commission is there, but also the big countries. And the Lord told always to me that the support of the big countries was decisive to him and for him for this success. So what I think someone like Kyriakos can do also is to take the big countries, to put them in a room, to take the keys and to and say, now you find a solution. Otherwise, you don't exit. You know, it was the way in which the popes were voted many times in the Middle Age in Viterbo. And the idea was to close them, the cardinals, and without the key and the conclave.
Some thoughts for the next Eurogroup. One last question. We talked about the big countries, or ones who don't know they're small anyway, but can the smaller EU member states have a say and an active role in shaping this agenda? Or do you think ultimately it's what France and Germany want to do with that moves ahead?
So absolutely, they can have a larger role. And part of the agenda is actually driven by smaller states. I mentioned the leadership that this country, for instance, is trying to show in cross-border consolidation and M&As. But many countries are playing a huge role with their example in what they have managed to deliver. Look at what the Baltics have done, for instance, in digital transformation, or you can look at what many countries have done in many aspects. But more broadly, I'm on the optimistic side. I wouldn't be commenting on politics because part of my job is the delivery rather than the description of how it will be delivered potentially. But in reality, the key question here is being able to align the short-run reaction, as you suggested, on many crises, because we have many emerging crises, with long-run priorities. And to be frank, the IMF in the last Eurogroup presented a paper of the assessment of our energy measures in 2022, which was mixed. But part of that analysis showcased that we had 12% less of an adverse impact now because of what is happening at Hormuz, because of all the measures that we have taken vis-a-vis our energy policy in the European Union in the interim, investing in grids, investing in infrastructure, etc., and diversifying from Russian energy sources. So what you do in the short run, if it aligns with your long-run strategy, what was the RRF? The RRF was a reaction which integrated the long-run strategic priorities of Europe, vis-a-vis green, vis-a-vis digital. So part of our job is to be able to deliver that. And part of the delivery mechanism is aligning on what the North and the compass is. Let me repeat that. But having all of the above and integrating all national considerations on many topics, right now, there is a political will on behalf of the leaders. They had the chance to present to the 27 leaders the priorities of the Eurogroup, and it was quite obvious at the Euro Summit that there is a push on behalf of the Commission President and all the leaders to deliver things at the level of the European Ministers of Finance quite soon. The digital euro will be a reality by 2029, for instance, and many elements of the SIU will also be a reality soon. Again, the question is how quickly, how much? And you cannot make predictions. You quoted Mike Tyson. Yogi Berra is my favorite philosopher, who said it's very difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. So having said this, politicians are not good at making predictions. But having said this, right now, as Enrico said, stars have aligned. And if you look at the theory of European integration, I have former professors of mine from the university sitting in the room. I vividly remember a European theory of integration, neo-functionalism, which said that Europe integrated more in every crisis that it had. The criticism is that you typically have a crisis and a suboptimal response. This has been the case on certain occasions. It hasn't been the case on others. But overall, we have deepened our institutions and our integration in every single crisis that we have faced. So right now, we're at a crossroads. Many emerging crises, many outstanding issues, and a table of leaders who actually want to see progress delivered because they understand that costs are equivalent to opportunity costs, and the opportunity costs have started becoming quite tangible.
I'm aware we're quite over time, so Mr. Letta, maybe we can close with an optimistic note from you because this is quite a complicated discussion, but always positive. What gives you confidence that Europe can make it and survive?
I have in mind two numbers, and I would like to leave you with these two numbers, because we said, and also my narrative is a narrative saying that we are lagging behind the US. But I give you two numbers because I think we have hope. And the two numbers are 51 and 28. 51 is the 51st state of the US. The president of the US has many candidates in mind. They don't seem to be very happy to be candidates. And also, I don't know if the Canadian ambassador here wants to tell us something about it. The 51st chair is empty. The 28th chair, that is the chair of the candidate to become the 28th member states of the European Union, is full of candidates. New candidates arriving. Now Iceland, with the idea to have a referendum to discuss about the possibility to be the 28th. The Western Balkans, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, maybe tomorrow Norway. I don't know a club with so many people wanting to be part of this club that is not a good place where to stay. So I think we are very attractive, and I think we are very proud to be attractive, and we have to be very responsible in delivering and giving our children what we had in the past from Europe.
I guess on that optimistic note, we can wrap it. Thank you so much both for the discussion.